I'm Jamie Beebe.
And I'm Jake Deptula. We're the host of the Strictly Stalking podcast.
Strictly Stalking is a true crime podcast that explores stalking stories told by the survivors in their own words.
Join us every Tuesday as we interview survivors, advocates, and experts to give you a deep dive into the workings of a stalking case.
Would you know where to turn if you or someone you know is being stalked? We'll also give you the resources to fight back, know your rights, and get justice.
Find Strictly Stalking wherever you listen to podcasts from Podcast One.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 274 of the True Crime All the Time Unsolved podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, how are you, man?
Hey, I'm doing good, man.
I like to hear that.
Yeah.
Makes me feel all warm and fuzzy inside.
I'm glad you feel warm and fuzzy.
Let's go ahead and give our shout-outs. For Patreon, we had Christy Tolugan.
Hey, Christy.
Laura Arnold.
Hey, thank you, Laura.
Peyton Smith.
What's going on, Peyton?
The DeRosa Rouquette family.
DeRosa Roquette.
Tina McCants.
What's going on, McCants?
Megan Hawker.
Hey, Hawker.
Eric Molnar.
There's good old Eric.
Crystal Ng.
Hey, Crystal.
Raylyn Paul.
What's going on, Raylan?
Sugar Sticks.
Hey, Sugar Sticks.
Linda Baker.
I appreciate that, Baker.
Cindy Stanley.
What's going on, Cindy?
Alicia Mason.
Hey, Alicia.
Zoe K. Kelly.
Hey, appreciate that, Zoe.
Elwira Oliwa.
Hey, Wyra.
Sarah Sweat jumped out at our highest level.
What's up, Sarah?
Sylvia Davis.
Hey, Sylvia.
Emma McPherson.
Appreciate that, Emma.
Christina Furnish.
Hey, thank you, Christina.
Rochelle Emery.
Hey, thank you, Rochelle.
Pencil Junkie.
You like pencils, don't you?
No, I like pens.
Okay.
I'm a pen guy. Susie Corbett.
Hey, what's going on, Corbett?
And last but not least, Nick Osborne jumped out at our highest level.
Hey, thanks, Osborne.
And if we go back into the vault, this week we selected Amber Geiken.
Hey, appreciate that, Amber.
So we appreciate the new and the continued Patreon support. We had great PayPal donations from Yading Tina Chang.
Hey, appreciate that, Yading.
Marguerite McCowan gave a sizable donation.
Thanks, Marguerite.
And Richard Amy.
Hey, appreciate that, Richard.
Yeah, so thanks to everyone. Gibbs, we have a lot out right now. On Saturday, we dropped a new Patreon-only episode on Robert Liberty, a man known as the Candlelight Killer. A lot of strange facts and information going on in that case. And we have a new TCAT out on Mary Keenan O'Connor, a lesser-known criminal from the 30s, but her case made front-page headlines. And basically, she confessed to hitting a 5-year-old girl.
Yeah.
Who was later found dead.
It's a good one.
And then the question became, did Mary kill her? Or did somebody else come along later and do something? But there was so much information. It's actually a two-parter. So part 1 is out right now.
Give it a listen.
Yeah, check it out. All right, buddy. Are you ready to get into this episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved?
I am.
We are talking about the Phillip Island murders. In September 1986, one young woman was violently murdered on Phillip Island, Australia, and another woman disappeared. So a lot of questions in this unsolved case, as there are in, many of the unsolved cases that we do. One of the questions is, are the two cases related? Another question that, is floating around is, did one of the women kill the other and then herself? The cold cases of Beth Barnard and Vivienne Cameron have been unsolved for more than 30 years. So we'll get into all the details, poke around, some of these questions and all of that. Phillip Island lies off the southern coast of Australia. It's about 90 minutes from Melbourne. It's famous for its diverse wildlife and motorsports. The evening penguin parade draws hundreds of visitors every day to watch the world's largest flock of small penguins leave the sea and parade back to their rock caves at dusk.
Just want to see that, don't you?
I would love to see that.
It'd be amazing.
I think I've told you a number of times, Australia is on my bucket list.
Yeah.
I really want to go to Australia. I've actually been watching this YouTuber out of Australia that does like some survival stuff where he'll go 2 or 3 days out in the bush. He also does some fishing, off the coast. I don't know. It looks like a place that would be really cool to visit. And obviously we have a lot of great fans.
We just need to put it on the calendar.
All right. We'll do that.
And I can go down there and say, good day, mate.
Yeah. Don't say anything when we get off the plane, please. So there are more penguins than people on this island. Phillip Island is home to only about 3,000 people who live there year round. Now those numbers swell to about 40,000 each summer as vacationers flood in to the island for the beaches and into some of the resorts. According to 60 Minutes Australia, Vivienne Cameron's family owned the motorsport track on Phillip Island. Her husband, Fergus, looked after their farm in addition to working at the motor track. It was known that Fergus was having an affair with one of their ranch hands named Beth Barnard. So first of all, you've got me with the name Fergus.
I knew you'd be hooked.
I'm all in. Now, going back to a conversation we had in a couple of weeks ago on Unsolved, would I name my child, if I had a boy, Fergus Ferguson? I probably would not.
But you said probably. You didn't say for sure you would not.
Well, I leave a little wiggle room for everything.
Yeah.
60 Minutes Australia described Beth Barnard as a young woman from Melbourne who traveled to Phillip Island one summer and fell in love with its relaxed, laid-back vibe and beach life. I think a lot of people do that.
Want that laid-back beach vibe?
Well, you get to a place and you just fall in love with it. The people, the atmosphere, and you want to stay. I think that's happened to many people over the years. She was a popular young woman with plenty of friends. She was friendly and outgoing. Beth worked as a ranch hand for Vivienne and Fergus Cameron to fund her stay on the island. I mentioned watching YouTube videos. I've also been watching some videos of people who do like sailing.
Oh, yeah?
Like permanently.
Oh, just that's what they do.
I mean, they have sold everything, bought a big boat, and they live on the boat full time. And a lot of times they'll stop off somewhere and work for however many months they need to kind of fund the rest of their year. That's their life.
That's cool. I like that.
On the ocean. Beth was living in a vacation home that belonged to the Cameron family. She had a university degree in agricultural science and was knowledgeable about her job and the tasks that it entailed. Beth also worked part-time at the nightly penguin parade.
That'd be pretty cool to work at the penguin parade with all those people coming over to visit.
Now, obviously it was a big draw. I don't know what she did there. So when you say it was pretty cool, I mean, I think it depends on what her job was at the penguin parade.
Well, that's true.
But we mentioned it, right? Beth Barnard and Fergus Cameron were having an affair. They met while both were working at the penguin parade. And Beth quickly fell for Fergus, who was described as a handsome guy.
Oh, he is a Fergus.
He is a Fergus, so... And we said, Beth was outgoing. She was popular. She had a lot of people, a lot of men, Gibbs, lined up who I'm sure wanted to date her. But despite Fergus being married, she was attracted to him. It was said that Fergus liked the dangerous aspect of their relationship, but said that he wouldn't divorce his wife. It was as though, he enjoyed the deception that, kind of came with this secret affair. And sadly, I think that might be true for quite a few men.
Yeah, I wonder why that is.
Yeah, I don't know, because I would not enjoy that dangerous part of it. But I do think there are people, it's not just men, I'm sure women too, the idea of I could get caught. Does that make it more enticing? Does it make it like forbidden fruit?
Yeah.
That kind of aspect. I think there is something to that for some people. Maybe they wouldn't even like this person or want to date this person, but because they're not supposed to, it adds to the attraction. Maybe in some cases, I don't know.
Well, I guess some people just like to live on the edge.
And I would say that would be okay if you're talking about skydiving or, cliff diving, race car driving. There's all kinds of things, riding these fast roller coasters. Okay, that can give you that adrenaline rush you need or you want.
Right.
You're not hurting anybody else. Obviously, this situation is much different. The Daily Mail uncovered that Vivienne had once walked in on both Beth and Fergus and caught the pair hugging in the barn. And, it was said that it was clear to her that it was much more than just a friendly hug. It was a lingering kind of romantic embrace. And there's a difference. And I think, pretty much anyone can tell that difference. What resulted after it that night was a violent argument between Vivienne and Fergus about him cheating. Fergus later told police that Vivienne punched him several times in the head during their fight. But despite the fight, the, allegations of cheating, the pair remained together. The Daily Mail reported that on the evening of Beth's murder, September 22nd, 1986, Fergus finished work at the Penguin Parade at 8 p.m. and then went to see Beth and stayed with her until about 9 p.m. When he got home, he went into another room and had a long telephone conversation with an unknown person. When he came back into the kitchen, his wife Vivienne and his sister Marnie confronted him about where he'd been prior to coming home. Apparently, they had called his employer and they were told that he left at 8 p.m. So that left about an hour unaccounted for.
Well, acquiring minds want to know.
Well, and especially when you've had some blowouts about the fact that I think you're cheating on me.
Right.
Okay. That hour becomes a lot more crucial, a lot more suspicious. In reports on the case by 9 News, Vivienne was described by friends as shy and withdrawn. To those she didn't know well, she only opened up to her close friends. And that's something I'm very familiar with. My wife is very much like that. She can be a lot of fun with people that she knows well.
Right.
But when she doesn't know people, she tends to be a little more introverted, reserved, shy. They also said that Vivienne could be awkward in social situations if she felt nervous or unsure of herself, or if she didn't know the people very well. But one thing that everybody agreed on was that Vivienne was extremely devoted to her children. 9 News reported that Vivienne and Fergus had 2 young sons who were never publicly named, but were described as young, one being preschool age and the other being like elementary school age. Vivienne crafted her life to revolve around them. She often volunteered in their school classes. She volunteered with the PTA, and she planned vacations and outings that often centered around her boys.
That's what good parents do.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Friends who were interviewed said she talked about her kids constantly and appeared to love being a mother. Everyone who knew Vivienne knew that she was first and foremost a mom. And I think all of this is important for us to talk about. Number one, because we want to get a sense of who Vivienne was.
Right.
But also because it's going to make it that much stranger when we talk about, what happened to Vivienne. And when you get into some theories, these descriptions make some of those almost ludicrous.
Yeah, implausible.
According to 60 Minutes Australia, on the evening of September 22nd, 1986, Vivienne and Fergus had a violent argument. Again, this one centered around, his cheating. So we talked about it. He got home late. He took this long phone call. Fergus has said that he could tell Vivienne was upset when he entered the kitchen. He also said that Marnie seemed agitated. And very quickly, she got up and left. When he and his wife started arguing, apparently she went home. She just lived right up the road. Fergus would later say that during this heated argument, Vivienne broke a wine glass and cut him pretty badly on the face with a glass shard. And as he turned around, he claimed she stabbed him several times in the back with this shard of glass. The wound required stitches. So they called Marnie and asked if she would return to their home to keep watch over their children so they could go to the hospital to get his wounds checked out.
So an argument turns a little violent.
Well, pretty violent if you're slashing someone on the face and stabbing them in the back. That's a lot of violence. Now, we only have his side of it, right? And there's a reason for that. But you do have Marnie and her husband, Ian, who did come over to the house to babysit the boys. Vivienne and Fergus left for the hospital. So that part we know is real.
Right.
Hospital staff later said that the couple remained tight-lipped about the cause of his wounds. He required several stitches to his ear to close a gash and a few stitches and dressing to the cut wound on his back. So, you can argue about how it went down, but obviously the guy had some wounds.
Yeah.
I think that part can be substantiated through records. News.com.au reported that when they returned home around 12:30 a.m., the Camerons asked Marnie and Ian to leave so that they could talk about their marriage. They got a lot of stuff going on.
They do, and I don't think anybody's going to get any sleep anytime soon.
Well, and it's not the type of conversation that you want to have, even with relatives around, friends around. You don't want it, right? This is very private. A few sources claimed that during this conversation, and Fergus has said this as well, Vivienne agreed to leave their home and leave the marriage, and that the kids would remain at the farm on Phillip Island with Fergus and Beth, and she would go to Melbourne to live with her parents. Okay, so this is why it was so important to talk about Vivienne, how much she loved her children. Right. This does not sound like something she would say when you look back at what everybody said about her.
Yeah, her kids were her world.
Right. So she's just going to willingly leave without her boys and leave them not only with her husband, but with Beth. I think women everywhere are cringing.
For sure.
As I talk about it. According to 9 News, a ton of people said, no way Vivienne would have ever said that. Again, we said it. She was obsessed with her children. She loved being a mom. And these people that talked to the news believed she would fight for as long and as hard as it took to make sure that she remained with her children. She would never walk away from them voluntarily. Now, between the two scenarios that I just mentioned, which one seems more likely?
Exactly.
The second.
Of course.
Right? Now, if you had a bunch of people saying she was a bad mother, she didn't really like being a mother.
She never wanted to be around her kids.
Yeah, that would be different. I still would have a hard time believing it, but, would it be possible? Maybe in that scenario, yeah, I would say, okay, maybe we'll entertain that thought. True Crime All the Time Unsolved is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Let's face it, sometimes multitasking can be overwhelming. Like when your favorite podcast is playing and the person next to you is talking and your car fan is blasting, all while you're trying to find the perfect parking spot. But then again, sometimes multitasking is easy, like quoting with Progressive Insurance. They do the hard work of comparing rates, so you can find a great rate that works for you, even if it's not with them. Give their nifty comparison tool a try, and you might just find getting the rate and coverage you deserve is easy. All you need to do is visit Progressive's website to get a quote with all the coverages you want, like comprehensive and collision coverage or personal injury protection. Then you'll see Progressive's direct rate, and their tool will provide options from other companies all lined up and ready to compare, so it's simple to choose the rate and coverages you like. Press play on comparing auto rates. Quote at Progressive.com to join the over 27 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy. Hey, TCAT Unsolved fans, I want to tell you about my new favorite whiskey. Starward Whiskey is the most awarded whiskey that you've never heard of. That's right, Starward was named the most awarded distillery of the year at the 2022 San Francisco World Spirits Competition. That's a big win for a little distillery. Starward makes deliciously versatile modern whiskeys made for today's curious drinker. And the thing that has really grabbed me about their whiskeys is that they're sippable and mixable. Their distillery is in the heart of Melbourne, Australia, home to lovers of food, flavor, and adventure. And that's part of what makes this whiskey different. Starward pushes the boundaries of what whiskey can be, from their unique distilling process using juicy red wine barrels to their range of whiskeys. My favorite right now is their twofold double grain whiskey. It is seriously very, very tasty. But don't take my word for it. Be the judge for yourself. Give Starward's award-winning whiskeys a try and get $20 off your order using the code UNSOLVED. Visit starward.com, that's STARWARD.com, and get $20 off your order shipped straight to your door using the code UNSOLVED. Starward.com, code UNSOLVED. Sip Starward responsibly. Cheers. News.com.au reported that Vivienne and Fergus argued into the small hours of the morning, and at one point Vivienne asked Fergus to leave the house. Vivienne drove Fergus down to Marnie and Ian's house, and that's where he spent the night. At 3 a.m., Vivienne called her friend and asked if she could come over to watch her kids while she took Fergus to the hospital. The friend agreed and drove to the Cameron house. But when she got there were no adults there, and the children were there, but they were asleep. So the friend assumed that the situation with Fergus must have been pretty urgent, that they couldn't even wait for her to get there. And so they left for the hospital, and that's where they were.
Yeah, it probably made sense since she saw that Vivienne didn't even take her purse when she left. They must have been in such a rush, because I don't know too many women that will leave their purse behind.
No, I don't think many do. But if it was an emergency situation, could you see somebody running out of the house so quickly that they forget it? Yeah.
Yeah.
I could see that. But Fergus's sister states that he was at her house at that time, and that the hospital trip took place hours earlier, and that there was no second hospital visit. So this is where the waters get a little more muddy.
Yeah.
It's a very strange situation, because Vivienne never returned home. The following morning, the friend was still babysitting the Cameron boys, but was becoming impatient. I mean, she needed to go to work. So she called Marnie's house and learned that Fergus was there. She told Fergus about the situation, and apparently Gibbs, he didn't understand, but agreed to send his brother to get his children and have them brought to his sister's house. So the older child attended school, but apparently the younger one didn't. So needed someone to watch him, all day long. Fergus contacted his brother, Don, a councilman on Phillip Island. Both Fergus and Don tried to reach Vivienne, but they were unsuccessful. Don brought the youngest child to Marnie's house, and he took the older boy to school. It was reported that they were both concerned that no one seemed to know where Vivienne was, especially since she left her children with a friend in the middle of the night, saying she was going to the hospital.
I think if I was the friend, I'd be really upset, wanting to know why I was lied to.
Yeah, because ultimately it's going to come out that it was a lie, at least according to not just Fergus, but, other people.
Right.
The hospital visit was earlier. Again, something that can be substantiated. There are records of what time they got there and all of that. Vivienne had also volunteered to bring in fruit and juice to her son's class that day. Something that, people who knew her said she would never miss without at least, notifying someone or making other arrangements for someone else to do it.
Yeah, I think if you're that good mom as she was described, she would make sure that got taken care of.
Yeah, it's not something you're just going to blow off.
Right.
You're not going to want to disappoint your child, first of all.
No.
There was no record of Vivienne visiting the hospital, on the island or the mainland that evening, other than accompanying Fergus earlier that night when he sought treatment, as reported in the Daily Mail. Fergus said his immediate concern was for his lover, Beth. He said that at the hospital the prior evening, Vivienne said that she was going to, quote, kill the bitch. Fergus claims this comment by Vivienne sparked his concern for Beth.
You know, I can see when you're having this argument about infidelity, talking about the other party, that one party might say that about that individual, right? I'm going to kill that.
Might say something that you probably shouldn't say.
Exactly.
You know, in hindsight.
Right.
Yeah.
But you're frustrated.
Yeah, I mean, you get clouded with anger, and we all say things that we shouldn't say or don't really mean when we get super angry. But let's go back to this guy talking to the Daily Mail, and his concern, his immediate concern, this is what he said, was for Beth. No immediate concern for his wife, who nobody can seem to find. I found that as odd. Not that he had concern for Beth. I understand the context and why he might be concerned that harm might come to her. It just seems strange when you're talking to a paper to just talk about Beth and not say, and I'm really concerned for my wife because nobody seems to know where she is.
I'm just wondering if he knew Vivienne so well that he really believed that Vivienne was willing to do that. And that's where his concern came from.
Well, could it have been justified if she really did, gash his ear, stab him in the back? Was she capable of doing something when she got really, really mad? That I don't know.
Yeah. Could be some anger management issues there.
The Daily Mail also reported that while he has never explained why he did not call Beth on the phone, Fergus asked Ian and Dawn to go to Beth's house to let her know what was happening and to check on her. So no doubt he was extremely concerned with her well-being.
But not concerned enough to call her right away.
It seems strange.
It does seem strange.
Because it's very easy to pick up the phone and say, hey.
Are you home? Are you okay?
I just want to let you know this is what's going on. Maybe you might want to stay in a hotel or whatever. Now, the two men agreed to do what he asked. They drove to the farmhouse where Beth was living. Don and Ian entered the home through an unlocked back door that was slightly open after they didn't receive, any answers to knocks on the door. They found Beth in her bedroom. She was lying on the floor, almost in the doorway of her room, covered with a blanket pulled up to her nose. The 23-year-old woman had been brutally murdered. According to news.com.au, underneath the blanket, detectives discovered that Beth's nightgown had been pulled up to her neck. Her throat was slashed so deeply that her neck bone was exposed. She also had a number of other cuts and slashes on her body. Her upper lip had been cut in half, and her top left tooth was knocked out. She had been stabbed repeatedly and had numerous defensive wounds on her hands, including a cut between her thumb and forefinger that sliced clear through the webbing of her hand. So, Gibbs, this was an extremely brutal murder.
Had to be shocking to see that.
I think detectives were also shocked by the fact that Beth's killer had carved the letter A into her chest so deeply that the skin was filleted. That's the way it was described.
It was.
Fatty tissue was exposed, and it was so large that it spanned her entire torso, from her hip bones to her breasts. Right? I'm picturing that. That is a very big letter A.
It had to just be somebody that was so upset, so angry with her to do that.
Yeah, because, the way that we described it, this was not what you would think of as like a superficial or a thin cut. This was a slash. This was a deep, deep cut that, was done to make this letter A. This caused some in the media to call Beth's murder the Scarlet Letter murder. Obviously, a reference to the novel of the same name by Nathaniel Hawthorne.
I've seen the movie. I've never read the book.
I think I read the book. Maybe I was forced to in high school. I know there's a person who has an affair, who's branded with the letter A.
This is a another level of branding somebody with an A, though, when you actually carve it into them.
Well, and you're also killing the person.
Yeah.
In the, you know, as well. The person in the book was not killed. They were just branded for life, I guess, if you want to call it that. Shamed, to be shamed. The medical examiner believed Beth was already dead when the letter was carved into her. You know, some media referred to it as the Scarlet Letter murder, some as the Love Triangle murder. Sometimes you'll see it referred to as the Phillip Island murder. So it goes by a number of different names depending on the media, the outlet. But, you know, one thing that I saw a lot in the research was that this island had an extremely low murder rate. So this was an even bigger deal. Not that it wouldn't be a big deal wherever it happened.
Sure.
But obviously, the lower the murder rate, the bigger any murder becomes.
Yeah, when you have a population that's normally 3,000, besides that summertime when it kicks up to 40,000, it is going to be a shock to the community.
Scattered around Beth's body, police found cigarette butts and a knife. And in the bathroom, they found several blood-stained paper towels. According to the Daily Mail, when Don and Ian found Beth's brutalized body, they contacted the Cowes police station, located on the island. The Daily Mail reported that, according to police officer Cliff Ash, when Don and Ian arrived at the police station, they began a rambling tale that made very little sense about family arguments and fights. Ash estimated that it took them over 10 minutes for the men to tell him that Beth was unwell. And it wasn't until Ash pressed them, asking, "What are you trying to say?" that the men mentioned that they thought something had happened to Beth. "We think she might be dead." Okay, there are a lot of parts to a lot of the cases that we do that don't make a lot of sense. This is obviously, to me, one of them. Now, you could argue that maybe these two men were traumatized, but to talk to a police officer and say, Beth is unwell, when in fact she had been brutally murdered, that seems so very strange.
It is strange. It's like,
unwell is such a strange term to use.
Why wouldn't you just rush in and say, "We've got somebody that's been murdered.
Yeah, help us.
Help us.
She's dead," or, you know, something. Unwell is just so very odd. Officer Ash and another officer named Peter McHenry drove out to Beth's farmhouse with Don and Ian, and they discovered Beth's lifeless body lying on the floor. Under the blanket covering Beth's body, they found all the injuries that we've talked about. You know, her neck had been deeply slashed. She had such violent injuries to her head, neck, and chest. They didn't want to disturb the crime scene, so they replaced the blanket and waited outside for the detectives to arrive. And my thought here is that, you know, if these two men come in and say, "We believe she's been murdered,"
right,
then detectives are probably going out with everybody, or they're meeting them there.
Yeah, it changes the whole thought process, right?
Yeah, but if you just say, you know, "We think someone's dead,"
yeah,
it could be they just died of natural causes. Well, you know, police officer may go check it out, but they don't know that it's a murder scene.
Yeah, exactly.
And obviously when they find that out, well, then things change pretty quickly. Forensic investigators found Beth's nude body in a large pool of blood. A bloody handprint on the wall would later be determined to be Beth's. They also learned that whoever slashed Beth's neck did so after yanking her head violently to the side before cutting it with the knife, as the wound was not a single slash, but multiple deep slashes.
Rage.
Sounds like it. The wound was measured to be over 4 inches wide and 2.5 inches deep. I mean, that's sickening.
It is.
When you think about the width and the depth of this wound, or you know, all of these wounds combined, or these slashes. One carotid artery was severed, but the other was intact. This led the authorities to believe that her killer was standing behind her and pulled her head to the side to inflict the neck wound. When the homicide division arrived, they began collecting evidence and looking for clues to help them determine who killed Beth. They immediately noted that the killer had covered her face with a blanket. Something that, again, that comes up in a lot of cases. We've talked about it many times. I saw in the research talk about this being a psychological phenomenon known as undoing, where the killer tries to cover up their crime due to guilt.
Sure. They don't want to see that person's face, remember that person's face.
I get that. I've often heard of it being possibly a sign that the killer knows the victim, and maybe those things go hand in hand. They mesh together. Multiple witnesses spotted Vivienne's Land Cruiser on the bridge connecting Phillip Island to the mainland of Australia. Police found it there on the morning of the 23rd. Inside, they found 2 packs of cigarettes that were Vivienne's regular brand, a washcloth covered in blood, and a large carving knife. What they didn't find was Vivienne or Vivienne's body. Vivienne Cameron would never be seen again.
Doesn't look good, though, when they find the car with the bloody wash rag and the knife in it. A knife.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, testing and all of that would have to be done. But I think right away, it would be hard not to try to make a connection there.
Right.
Fergus made a number of conflicting statements in what he told investigators early on, and then some of that would change later to fit his narrative of what version of events he was trying to reinforce. For example, he first admitted to the police that if they split up, the children would remain in the farmhouse with Vivienne, and he and Beth would need to leave to live somewhere else. Later, though, he said that during their argument, Vivienne admitted she wasn't such a great mother and agreed to allow Fergus and Beth to raise her children, which we've already talked about. It just doesn't seem to make sense. Now, the first one does.
Sure.
The first statement, you're the cheater.
Right.
In this scenario, you leave. If you want to be with this person, you leave, you go find somewhere else to live. I'll raise the kids here.
Yeah. So one thing that drives me crazy about some of these cases is when the people involved change their statements. If they say one thing and then they turn around and say something drastically different.
Yeah, it seems to happen quite a bit. And it's normally not like little small details change, or you add something, or you remember something. It's like they start saying the complete opposite of what they said before. And yeah, I get it. It's maddening sometimes. The other thing that I think about is this statement that Fergus said Vivienne made. It would have come after one of these big, heated arguments about him cheating.
Yeah.
I don't see her giving in the heat of that moment. I mean, I don't see her giving in at all, but especially with that type of fury or anger or, on top of that type of argument. If anything, I would see the opposite. I'm upset. You get the heck away from me. I'm not leaving my kids. You're just go away.
Yeah.
And the kids stay with me.
You get out of here. That's why I just sliced you with this glass.
Fergus told investigators that Vivienne drove him to his sister's house where he spent the night. Vivienne then told him she was headed home. One of the Camerons' elderly neighbors reported hearing a loud SUV pull into the Cameron driveway. They believed it was the Toyota Land Cruiser. The woman's son had a Land Cruiser, and she said it sounded like his vehicle. But obviously that was the same vehicle that Vivienne drove. Detectives were immediately suspicious of Vivienne and Fergus Cameron. Now, how could they not be, right?
Sure.
One or maybe even both of them might have a motive, could have a motive to want Beth dead.
I mean, you have an argument for both, right?
Yeah, I mean, Vivienne had told some of her friends that she wanted to save her marriage to Fergus. I think she knew, or at the very least suspected, but I think she knew that he was having an affair with Beth. So the question had to become, did she kill Beth Barnard to eliminate her as a rival? Because if Beth goes away, then does the marriage get back on track?
Keep the family together.
So that's a possible motive, right, for Vivienne to want to kill Beth. A possible motive for Fergus could be that he's got to get rid of his mistress because that's the only thing that's going to save his marriage. There's a financial component.
Absolutely.
To every marriage that has to be factored in.
Could be devastating to him.
Could be. Some people have asked the question of whether Fergus staged the crime scene to point the finger away from him and towards someone else. The problem I have with that, I did see it floating around out there, is that who else could he be pointing it at other than Vivienne?
Yeah. And why would he want to do that?
Well, he wouldn't if he wants to save his marriage.
Right.
I mean, I think the letter A is front and center in pointing it to someone else, but the only one it really could point to is Vivienne. So that part I wasn't sure about. But these were all questions that detectives were eager to ask Vivienne and Fergus. The problem was they couldn't find Vivienne, right? She was missing. Despite divers searching the water around the bridge and helicopters searching the area for days, no sign of Vivienne was ever found. Not even her eyeglasses or her scarf that she was reported to be wearing that evening, and definitely not her body. The Melbourne Age reported that if Vivienne did jump from the bridge to end her life, she would be the first person to do so. No other person is known to have fallen or jumped from this bridge.
That says a lot.
Well, there is only about 3,000 people there,
That's
but
true.
I get it.
Well, there's always going to be that first person that does everything.
I don't think they were saying it was impossible.
No.
That somebody could jump off of the bridge. They're just saying nobody had ever done it or even fallen off.
Yeah, up to that point.
Don and Ian have said that they stopped at the Cameron home on their way to Beth's farmhouse. They noticed that Vivienne's car was parked in the driveway, but she wasn't home, according to them, because they got out, knocked on the door, and there was no answer. As reported by the Melbourne Age, at 10 a.m. on Tuesday, September 23rd, a local woman named Glenda Frost received a call from Vivienne, asking if she could tell her where Vivienne could locate a patchwork quilt to purchase, as she wanted to give it to someone as a gift. Glenda was entertaining a house guest named Pam at the time she received this call. Pam was also a witness to the call. Glenda told Vivienne who she could contact for the quilt and asked if she wanted the supply list for next week's class because Vivienne took quilting lessons with Glenda. Vivienne declined, and Glenda could hear voices and loud noises in the background coming through the line. So Glenda asked Vivienne if the kids were acting up, but Vivienne said, "No, it's okay now," and she hung up the phone. The Melbourne Age also reported that later that same morning, Glenda went into town to have coffee and learned about the murder of Beth Barnard. So she contacted the police to let them know of the phone call that she had received from Vivienne at 10 a.m. So it's an interesting tidbit, right?
Yeah.
Assuming this woman's telling the truth, and I don't know why she would have a reason to lie, that would mean that Vivienne was alive, at least at 10 a.m., the morning after the murder.
Right.
So I think it's time to talk about some theories. News.com.au reported that police first believed that Vivienne Cameron killed Beth Barnard in a fit of jealous rage, then killed herself by jumping to her death off the bridge where her Land Cruiser was discovered. And I could see why that would be a very early theory. We mentioned the bloody washcloth. We mentioned the large knife. The Land Cruiser is abandoned on a bridge. Okay, it all seems to fit. Vivienne's purse was in the car and she couldn't be found, right? No one could locate her. So I think one problem with this theory is that friend who we talked about, who came over to watch the Cameron kids in the middle of the night when Vivienne called and said that she had to take Fergus to the hospital. That friend observed Vivienne's car in the driveway and said that her purse was sitting on the table. We mentioned it earlier because, it made the friend think that, wow, she must have really left in a hurry to leave her purse behind. So if Vivienne did murder Beth Barnard, she would have had to drive to Beth's house, kill her, then drive back home to retrieve her purse from the kitchen table, then drive to the bridge to jump off and end her life, which is not out of the realm of possibility.
No.
I think what does come up, though, is if she intended to end her life, why would she need to go home to get her purse?
Why would she even care about that stuff?
Wouldn't matter. So it seems to be kind of a big inconsistency with that theory.
Right.
You know what it brings to mind is A Few Good Men. If you remember in that movie, one of the big things was that the guy that was murdered was supposedly scheduled to be shipped off the base.
You're right.
But he hadn't packed up any of his stuff.
Right.
And it seemed like such a big inconsistency. It kind of blew the case wide open.
Right. If you're going to catch a plane the next morning, why wouldn't your stuff be packed, ready to go?
One of Vivienne's friends said after her disappearance in an interview that during a conversation with Vivienne, a week before she went missing, Vivienne stated that she knew Fergus was having an affair and wanted to take her children and return to Melbourne with them. We've already talked about a number of people. Gibb said, she was a devoted mother. She would never allow them to be raised by Fergus and his mistress,
right,
Beth. So, that story put forward by Fergus, it's tough. It's a little difficult to believe that it's true. I can't say it's not.
Right.
I can only say that for me, it's a tough one to buy.
It's a tough sell for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's hard to believe that Vivienne would just willingly walk out of her kids' lives, never to see them again, that she wouldn't put up a fight to, get custody of them.
Right.
I don't think it would be that tough of a fight. I think it would be fairly easy for her to gain custody, but I don't know. That part just does not make sense to me. Now, there is a theory that has been floated that Fergus murdered his wife, Vivienne, after she killed Beth.
Well, maybe he got that upset that his lover was now dead and he was angry with his wife.
Yeah, it's a theory. Some people have said, well, maybe it helps explain some inconsistencies in some of his statements. Some of Beth's friends have said that she was thinking of ending the affair with Fergus or giving him an ultimatum to leave his wife or she would end the relationship. That could be a motive for Fergus to take some type of drastic action to kill one or both of the women in his life.
Well, most people don't like to be given an ultimatum.
No, it's not high on my wish list. I'm not a big fan of ultimatums, but you and I have done enough cases to know that affairs, especially when children are involved, can end up very badly, including, ending up with someone dead.
Yeah.
We've seen it time and time again. It was reported by the Daily Mail that Beth's friends said that Beth was dealing with a stalker at the time of her murder. Apparently, there was someone who would sit in his car outside her house at night and would even mow her lawn when she wasn't home. And when she didn't ask this person to mow her lawn, and he would frequently leave flowers and notes for her.
Maybe some people be okay with the lawn thing. Go ahead and cut my grass.
Yeah, I wish somebody would randomly cut my grass. Now, stalking is a real thing. It's horrible.
It is.
A lot of people, especially women, have dealt with some really nasty stalkers. Flowers, notes, the mowing of the grass. That seems pretty tame. But if you're consistently sitting outside someone's house and staring in their window, and obviously we know stalking progresses and it leads to, sometimes really, really bad things.
I'm sure the anxiety that comes along with that
is brutal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure. Now, this was a man who Beth had dated in the past. So she knew him, but she had broken off the relationship. But he kept pestering her to try to get back together. At one point, it was said he became angry. The two had a heated exchange when Beth asked him to leave her alone because she just wasn't interested. Is that a motive? I think you could look at it as one. Some people have theorized that because this affair between Fergus and Beth was kind of well known around the small island, this stalker could have learned about it, become enraged, and murdered Beth. Some have posited that the carving of the letter A could be explained by this.
Yeah, maybe he felt that if you're not going to be with me, you're not going to be with anybody.
Beth apparently made an audio tape for a friend who lived far away, and she talked about this stalker. And it was reported that she sounded afraid when discussing the situation on this tape. It was also said that this guy left Phillip Island shortly after Beth's murder. However, news.com.au reported that police claim this man has been cleared of any suspicion regarding his involvement in Beth's murder, although they didn't really specify what led to him being dismissed as a potential suspect.
Must just left him as a creepy guy.
Yeah, again, I don't know. There's always things in these unsolved cases that we don't know. So, Gibbs, as we wrap up this episode, we're still left with the two questions. Who killed Beth Barnard? Could it have been Vivienne? Could it have been Fergus? Or could it have been this unnamed stalker? Or was it someone completely unknown to everyone?
Yeah, somebody not even on the radar.
Because we know that happens. Until we get some more clues or information, or at least the police do, we may never know that answer. And then the second question is, what happened to Vivienne? Did she take her own life? Did she, leave the island, start a new life somewhere?
Maybe she was murdered.
Or was she murdered? I don't know exactly where I'm leaning. The one thing that's always hard for me is to think that, a mother, especially a really devoted mother, is just going to run off and leave her children.
It just doesn't make any sense.
It's always a tough one.
Right.
But if you did kill someone and you had to make a getaway,
yeah,
that might be a reason to do it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm just saying that could be a possibility. I mean, I think it's one of the things that fascinates people about this case, because potentially you could have two victims here, or you could have a victim and a perpetrator. There's a lot of different scenarios. The problem is we just don't have enough information. We don't know the truth yet.
I can see where Vivienne got really upset with Beth being the other woman and maybe went over to have a conversation with her, and it went wrong.
Went very badly.
Very badly. She might have felt like she had no other option but to take her life.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the one thing about this case is that you could see a number of different scenarios making some sense. And I think that's what makes some of these cases interesting. Sometimes we do cases and, really is, I don't want to say it's well known, but it's thought by most that this is what happened. This is who did it. But technically it's unsolved because either the person died, they didn't have enough evidence, or something like that. In this one, there's a number of different avenues you can go down.
Right.
But you can't conclusively say that any of them are correct.
No.
You can just kind of lay out different theories or discuss different theories.
What does bug me is Fergus changing his story a couple times, and his brother and his brother-in-law, when they get to the police station, saying that Beth was unwell.
Yeah, I'm right with you. Again, is that proof of anything? No. Does it seem strange? Does it make some people look suspicious? Well, sure it does. Just because it's odd behavior.
Right.
But if you have any information related to the murder of Beth Barnard or the disappearance of Vivienne Cameron, please contact the Cowes Police Department at 613-5952-2037 or send an email through www.police.vic.gov.au. So tragic case, but also, fascinating with a lot of different layers and a lot of different possibilities. We got some voicemails, Gibbs. You want to check those out?
Yeah, let's hear them.
Hey, Mike and Gibby, this is Lucy. I'm calling from Chicago. I am just calling to say that I am a University of Michigan graduate and that you guys are probably the only two Ohio State fans that I'm okay with. So I just wanted to let you know that that's saying something because I'm a pretty adamant fan, but I love the show, both TCAT and TCAT Unsolved. I love them so much that I'm willing to overlook our differences and enjoy the show regardless of your allegiance. So I just wanted to let you guys know that you're awesome. I am Team Gibby. Stay safe and keep your own time ticking.
OH?
IO. And for those people who are not really all that familiar with the Michigan-Ohio State rivalry, that really is a big deal.
It is.
For her to be okay with us. And it's a great thing because if we could do that with more things, this world would be such a much better place.
That's right.
Let's all just love each other.
That's it.
Hi, Mike and Gibby. This is Melissa Lochner. I'm from Grand Prairie, Texas, right outside of Dallas. And I am so excited I finally finished True Crime All the Time. I haven't done the Unsolved yet, but I have been binging for forever. And I just got caught up today, July 25th. So excited. I'm excited to start Unsolved. I do want to say that you guys are awesome. I love the banter between the two of you. I'm Team Gibby and Team Fergie, probably a little more towards Gibby just because him and I have the same kind of mindset. But I want to thank you guys again for everything that you do, and keep your head on a swivel and keep your own time ticking.
Well, that's awesome. We really appreciate it.
We do.
So this will be like a little Easter egg for her when she gets to it on Unsolved. Hopefully she's a quick binger, or maybe she'll listen. Some people go back and forth. I don't know if a lot of people listen backwards, but I know a lot of people will listen to the new and then go back and slowly catch up on old and then meet.
I like to listen in reverse.
Oh my God.
I was just listening, actually paused to call you. I'm a little under the weather, so I was listening to entertain myself because that is the best way to entertain oneself when you don't feel good. Mike and Gibby. Anyway, I went off on a tangent. You were talking about forensic, and you said something about you would like to be, but you wouldn't want to be the one going through this species. And maybe it's my illness, but I cracked myself up because when Gibby said something about you don't want to be the poop guy or something like that, I thought to myself, oh, Mike doesn't want to be the pooper scooper. And I know that's really stupid, but I cracked myself up when I thought that. So I thought you might either think it's stupid or you might laugh too. Love you guys. Bye.
I don't think it's stupid at all. I think anytime you can laugh.
Sure.
Whether it's because we said something or because you turned something into something funny for yourself, that's a good day.
Just the word poop is funny.
It kind of is.
Kind of, yeah.
Because we're juvenile.
That's exactly right.
All right, buddy. That is it for another episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.
Well, this month, stream the funniest films for free on Pluto TV. Watch comedy classics like Anchorman, The Legend of Ron Burgundy, and Mean Girls. Or drop in for a Tyler Perry marathon with a Medea family funeral and Medea's witness protection. Pluto TV also has hundreds of channels and thousands of movies and TV shows like Get Shorty, Be Cool, Key and Peele, Comedy in Color, and more. And no contracts, no subscriptions, no fees, no joke. So download the Pluto TV app on your favorite streaming device and start laughing today. Pluto TV, drop in, watch free.